The transport shuttle carrying Earth's diplomatic team docked with Verathon Prime at exactly 0800 hours, Galactic Standard Time. Captain Gino stepped out first, his formal diplomatic uniform crisp and perfect. Behind him came Ambassador Myray, carrying the data cores containing humanity's application to the Galactic Council. Science Advisor Taiyang followed last, his eyes wide as he took in the massive station that served as the Council's neutral meeting ground. Jinho had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. He had studied every Council species, learned their customs, memorized their histories. He believed deeply that humanity belonged among the stars as equals, as partners in building a peaceful future. The wars of Earth's past were just that past. Humanity had grown, learned, and was ready to join the galactic community. The council chamber was enormous, built to accommodate 17 different species with wildly different biologies. Some breathed methane, others required high gravity, and a few existed partially in dimensions human eyes couldn't perceive. But they all gathered here, united by the harmony protocols that had kept peace across the galaxy for 3 centuries. High Arbiter Velmoth of the Quillarian Ascendancy presided over the session. His species resembled large birds with iridescent feathers and 6 eyes. He gestured for the human delegation to approach the central platform. Jinho walked forward, his heart pounding but his face calm. This was humanity's moment. People of Earth. Velmuth's voice echoed through translation devices. You come before this council seeking membership in our community. Tell us why we should accept your species. Jinho began his presentation. He spoke of Earth's diversity, of how humans had overcome their differences to unite as one planetary government. He showed images of human art, music, and literature. He displayed the technological achievements that had brought humanity to the stars in just 200 years. He emphasized humanity's eagerness to learn from older, wiser civilizations. Myray took over, presenting humanity's economic proposals. Earth could offer rare minerals from their asteroid mining operations. Human medical research had produced several treatments that might benefit other species. Human agricultural techniques could help feed growing populations across Council worlds. Taiyan concluded with scientific data showing humanity's commitment to environmental protection, their careful colonization practices, and their respect for other life forms. The presentation lasted 2 hours. When it ended, Jinho felt cautiously hopeful. Surely the council could see that humanity was ready. But then the questions began. A delegate from the Vraxian Collective asked about Earth's military forces. Jinho answered honestly humanity maintained a defense fleet of approximately 8,000 ships, plus planetary defense systems and a marine corps of 5 million personnel. He explained these were purely defensive measures. The Vraxian delegate's response chilled the room. Defensive? That fleet could conquer half the systems in this sector. Your Marines outnumber our entire police force by a factor of 10. Another delegate brought up Earth's history. The 2 world wars, the various conflicts of the 20th and 21st centuries, the near-nuclear annihilation humanity had barely avoided. Each war was catalogued, each weapon system analyzed, each casualty count displayed on the massive screens above. Jinho tried to explain. Yes, our past was violent, but we learned from those mistakes. We haven't had a major war in over a century. We've channeled that competitive energy into peaceful exploration. Competitive. Velmoth repeated the word as if it tasted foul. There is your problem, Captain Jinho. You speak of competition when we speak of cooperation. You speak of channeling aggression when we have transcended it entirely. Myray stepped forward, her voice sharp. With respect, High Arbiter, every species here has a military history. The Quillarians fought the expansion wars 400 years ago. The Tauraxians had their blood age. How are humans different? Because, Velmoth replied coldly, Those species grew beyond their violent natures before reaching the stars. You brought your aggression with you into space. Your very ships are designed for war, not exploration. Your colonies have armed fortifications. Your first instinct is to prepare for conflict. The debate continued for hours. Jinho argued until his throat was raw. He pointed out that the galaxy wasn't entirely peaceful. There were pirates, raiders, and unexplored sectors with unknown dangers. Shouldn't humanity be allowed to protect itself? The Council saw it differently. To them, humanity's preparations proved their violent nature. A truly peaceful species wouldn't need such extensive military forces. The fact that humans maintained weapons research programs, even if defensive, showed they hadn't truly committed to peace. Finally, after 8 hours of deliberation, Velmuth called for the Council's decision. The voting display lit up. 17 Council species voted. 0 approved humanity's application. 13 rejected it outright. 4 abstained. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Jinho felt as if he'd been physically struck. Murray's face had gone pale. Even Tai Yang, usually cheerful, looked devastated. But Velmuth wasn't finished. However, he continued, the Council recognizes that humanity has potential. We will not close the door completely. If Earth agrees to certain conditions, we will reconsider your application in 50 years. The conditions appeared on the display. Humanity must reduce its military fleet by 70%. All weapons research must cease immediately. Human colonies must accept Quillarian peacekeepers to oversee their activities. Earth must open its databases to Council inspection to ensure compliance. For 50 years, humanity would be a probationary species, allowed limited trade, but no voice in galactic affairs. Mireille found her voice first. These terms would leave us defenseless. What if we're attacked? What if we encounter hostile forces? The Council will protect you, Velmuth said, though his tone suggested he found the question absurd. We have maintained peace for 3 centuries through the Harmony Protocols. If you truly trust in peace, you will not need weapons. But you keep your weapons, Tai Yang pointed out quietly. I've seen the Quillarian Defense Fleet. 50 warships orbit your homeworld. Ceremonial vessels, Velmuth dismissed. Relics of our past, maintained for historical purposes. They have not fired a shot in anger for 200 years. Jinho stepped forward one last time. His idealism was crumbling, but he had to try. High Arbiter, we came here in peace. We came with open hearts and open hands. We're asking only to be treated as equals, to be given a chance to prove ourselves. These conditions you propose aren't a path to membership, they're a path to subjugation. Velmuth's feathers ruffled in what Jinho had learned was their equivalent of a dismissive shrug. That is your perspective, Captain. From ours, we are offering guidance to a young, troubled species. We have walked the path of civilization for millennia. We know what it requires. If humanity cannot trust in our wisdom, perhaps you are not ready to join us at all. And if we refuse these terms? Jinho asked, though he already knew the answer. Then you remain outside Council space. You will receive no access to Council trade networks, no sharing of Council technologies, no protection under Council law. Your ships will not be permitted in any Council-controlled systems. Economic sanctions will be implemented to encourage compliance. You will be alone in a very large, very dangerous galaxy. Velmuth leaned forward, his 6 eyes focusing on Jinho. We are not your enemies, Captain. We are trying to help you. Your species is like a child reaching for a sharp blade. We are merely asking you to put down the blade before you hurt yourselves or others. This is compassion, not cruelty. Jinho looked at his team. Murray's jaw was clenched tight. Tai Yang was staring at the floor. They had come so far, worked so hard, hoped so much. and it meant nothing. The Council had already decided humanity was too dangerous, too violent, too different. The presentation, the data, the arguments, all of it was just theater. "We will take your conditions back to Earth," Gino said finally. "Our government will make the decision." "You have one galactic standard cycle," Velmuth replied. 60 of your Earth days. After that, the offer expires and sanctions begin. The human delegation left the council chamber in silence. As they walked back to their shuttle, they passed other species representatives. Some looked at them with pity, others with barely concealed contempt. One delegate, a small being from a minor species called Kilden, caught Jinho's eye and offered what might have been a sympathetic nod. But he said nothing. On the shuttle back to their ship, Myray finally spoke. They were never going to accept us. This was decided before we even arrived. Taiyang agreed. I reviewed their application histories. Every species that joined the council did so at a much earlier stage of development. We're too advanced, too independent. They don't want equals. They want children they can guide. Jinho stared out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, beautiful blue Earth, where billions waited to hear if humanity had been accepted among the stars. He would have to tell them the truth, that the galaxy saw them as dangerous primitives who needed to be controlled. "We came in peace," he said quietly. "We offered them friendship, and they threw it back in our faces. What do you think Earth will decide?" Taiyang asked. Jinho was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I think the Council just made a terrible mistake. They think refusing us will make us weak. They don't understand that there's nothing more dangerous than someone who tried to do things the right way and was punished for it." The shuttle continued its journey back to the human ship, carrying 3 people whose faith in galactic peace had died in the cold light of the council chamber. Behind them, Verathon Prime gleamed in the light of its star. Beautiful and terrible, home to a council that would soon learn the price of arrogance. 6 months had passed since the council's ultimatum, and Earth was divided. The Global Assembly Hall in Geneva was packed with representatives from every nation, every colony, every station humanity called home. The debate had raged for weeks, and today the final vote would be cast. Jinho sat in the visitors' gallery, no longer wearing his diplomatic uniform. He'd resigned from the diplomatic corps a month ago, unable to stomach the endless discussions about surrendering to council demands. Myray sat beside him, also retired, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Only Taiyang remained in government service, now working with intelligence services to analyze the council's true intentions. On the assembly floor, the Prime Minister of the United Earth Government was presenting the case for acceptance. Her voice carried through the chamber with practiced calm. "We must consider the practical benefits of council membership. Access to their technology could advance our medical science by decades. Their trade networks would make Earth wealthy beyond measure. Yes, the terms are harsh, but perhaps they are the price of admission to a civilized galaxy." Admiral Haijin stood to respond. She was a veteran of the Outer System Wars, a conflict with separatist colonies that had nearly torn humanity apart 30 years ago. Her face bore scars from boarding actions, and her voice carried the weight of experience. "Prime Minister, these terms don't ask us to compromise. They demand we surrender. Reducing our fleet by 70% means abandoning colonies to whatever dangers lurk in uncharted space. Accepting foreign peacekeepers on our worlds means giving up sovereignty. We would not be joining the Council as members. We would be subjects." The debate continued. Some representatives argued that any price was worth paying for peace and prosperity. Others countered that a peace built on submission was no peace at all. The colony representatives were almost universally against acceptance. They would be the ones living under Quillarian oversight. After all, during a recess, Jinho found himself in a quiet corridor with Admiral Haijin. They'd never met before, but she recognized him immediately. Captain Jinho, I read your report from Virathon Prime. Every word. I failed, Jinho said simply. I believed we could make them understand us. You tried diplomacy. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. Haijin leaned against the wall, studying him. Tell me honestly, if we refuse the council, what do you think they'll do? Jinho considered the question carefully. Economic sanctions, certainly. They'll block our access to their trade routes. Maybe spread rumors about us to other species we haven't met yet. Make it harder for us to expand. But direct military action? No. They're too convinced of their own moral superiority for that. They'll just leave us alone and consider us a failed experiment. And if we're alone, Haijin said quietly, we'll need to be ready for whatever comes. You think something's coming? I think a galaxy that's been peaceful for 3 centuries is either very lucky or very naive. Probably both. Haijin pushed off the wall. I hope your diplomatic approach works, Captain. But if it doesn't, I'll be ready. The vote came that evening. The results were closer than anyone expected. 52% to reject the Council's terms, 48% to accept. Earth would go its own way. The announcement went out across all human channels. Some people celebrated. Others mourned. But everyone understood that humanity had just chosen a lonely path among the stars. Was approached the next day by the new Secretary of External Affairs. The Council needs to receive our formal response. You know them better than anyone. Will you deliver it? He wanted to refuse. The thought of facing Velmoth again made his stomach turn. But someone had to do it, and perhaps it should be him. Yes, I'll go. 2 weeks later, Jinho found himself back at Virathon Prime. The station looked exactly the same. But he felt different. Older, harder. He carried with him Earth's official response. Encoded in a simple data crystal, the council chamber was less crowded this time. Velmoth was there, along with a few other senior delegates. They clearly expected humanity to accept their generous offer. The idea that Earth might refuse probably hadn't seriously occurred to them. Jinho walked to the center platform alone. No team this time. Just him and the truth. High Arbiter Velmoth, honored delegates of the Galactic Council. I come today with Earth's response to your offer of probationary membership. He held up the data crystal. Our government has reviewed your terms carefully. We have debated them in our assemblies. We have considered them from every angle, and we must respectfully decline. The chamber went silent. Velmoth's feathers ruffled in obvious surprise. You refuse? Captain Jinho, perhaps you do not understand the implications. Without council membership, humanity will remain isolated, backward, alone. We understand perfectly, Jinho replied, his voice steady. We understand that you view us as dangerous children who need to be controlled. We understand that you cannot see us as equals. We understand that your offer was never about helping us join your community. It was about making us safe for you. A delegate from the Telraxian system spoke up. This is foolishness. You are one species against a galaxy. You need us far more than we need you. Perhaps, Jinho acknowledged, but we will not trade our freedom for your approval. Humanity tried to join your council peacefully, with respect and good faith. You rejected us. Very well. We will forge our own path. Velmoth stood, his full height imposing. If you refuse our guidance, Earth will receive no protection, no assistance. Your colonies will be outside council law. We will implement economic sanctions. Your people will suffer for this decision. Our people have suffered before, Jinho said quietly. We've survived ice ages and plagues, wars and disasters. We'll survive your sanctions too. but will survive as free people, not as subjects begging for scraps from your table. He set the data crystal on the platform. This contains our formal refusal and a notice of withdrawal from all pending diplomatic negotiations. Humanity wishes the Council peace and prosperity. We hope one day you will understand that rejecting peaceful cooperation has consequences. But whether you understand or not, we will endure. We always have. Jinho turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, High Arbiter. You told me that humanity was like a child reaching for a sharp blade. You wanted us to put down the blade before we hurt ourselves. But you never considered that we might need that blade to protect ourselves from things you haven't imagined yet. Your 3 centuries of peace have made you forget that the galaxy is a dangerous place. I hope you never have to remember. Velmuth's voice followed him. Is that a threat, Captain? No, Gino replied without turning around. It's a warning. Not from us. From reality. He left the council chamber for the last time. As he walked back to his shuttle, he passed that same small delegate, Kilvin, who had nodded to him before. This time, the alien spoke quietly. I studied your species, Captain Jinho, your history, your patterns. I tried to tell them what you would do if pushed. They would not listen. What did you tell them? Jinho asked. That humans are dangerous when divided, but predictable. But when you unite around a common cause, when you focus your energy on a single goal, you become something else entirely. Something unstoppable. Kilvin's eyes were sad. I told them that rejecting your peaceful overture might create the very threat they fear. They dismissed my concerns. Then they'll learn, Gino said. Or they won't. Either way, it's not our problem anymore. Back on Earth, the government was already implementing contingency plans. Admiral Haijin presented her proposals to the Security Council. Increase fleet production by 40%. Expand military academies. Accelerate weapons research. Strengthen colony defenses. Prepare for a future where humanity stood alone. Jinho was offered a new position, Chief of Strategic Affairs. His job would be analyzing potential threats and preparing humanity for whatever came next. He accepted. Myray joined the Office of Colonial Affairs, helping to ensure that human settlements could survive without council support. Taiyang continued his intelligence work, monitoring council space for any signs of danger. In the months that followed, humanity pulled together in a way it hadn't since the formation of the United Earth government. The colonies that had been most isolated received new resources and support. Shipyards worked around the clock. Research facilities pushed the boundaries of human technology. The council's sanctions did hurt. Trade suffered. Some luxury goods became scarce. But humanity had survived worse. And in surviving, they became stronger. Meanwhile, in the uncharted regions beyond council space, something ancient stirred. The Carthage swarm, dormant for millennia, began to wake. Their last conquest had been interrupted by a stellar phenomenon that forced them into hibernation. Now they were active again, hungry, and scanning the nearby regions for suitable prey. They detected the rich systems of council space, filled with billions of soft beings who had forgotten how to fight. The swarm's hive mind processed this information and made its decision. It was time to feed, but the swarm's long-range sensors also picked up something else. A small cluster of systems on the far side of the council's territory. These beings were different. Their ships bristled with weapons. Their colonies were fortified. Their transmissions spoke of war and preparation. The swarm cataloged humanity as a potential threat, but a minor one. These distant beings would be dealt with after the richer, softer targets were consumed. It was a logical calculation, based on available data. The swarm did not understand that it was looking at a species that had been preparing for war since the first primate picked up a stick to defend itself. It did not understand that humans had just been rejected by the galaxy they tried to join peacefully. It did not understand that humanity was angry, isolated, and ready to prove their worth. The swarm would learn these truths later. By then, it would be too late. Back on Earth, Jinho stood in his new office, looking at a star map of known space. The Council's territory glowed in blue. Human space was marked in white. And beyond both, vast stretches of unexplored stars waited in darkness. We wanted to join them, he said to himself. We offered peace. They chose to see us as threats. Fine. Let's show them what actual threats look like when they arrive. He didn't know about the Carthex yet. None of them did. But when the time came, when the galaxy that rejected humanity came crying for help, Jinho wondered what Earth would do. He suspected he already knew the answer. Humanity would help. Not because the Council deserved it. Not because they'd been treated fairly. But because, despite everything, humans still believed in protecting others. Even those who didn't believe in them. That was humanity's greatest weakness and greatest strength. The Council saw it as dangerous sentimentality. They would learn it was something far more powerful. They would learn what happens when you turn away from peace. 2 years after humanity's rejection from the Galactic Council, the first reports arrived at Verathon Prime. A Quilarian patrol had lost contact with a frontier colony called Thalos 4. This wasn't unusual. Sometimes communication arrays failed. Sometimes stellar phenomena interfered with signals. The Council dispatched a ship to investigate. The ship found nothing but debris. Thalos 4 had been home to 3 billion Quilarians. The planet's 3 moons hosted mining operations with another 100 million workers. All of it was gone. The cities were stripped to bedrock. The orbital stations were shattered hulks. The moons showed massive excavation scars, where something had literally consumed the resources down to the mantle. And there were bodies. Billions of bodies floating in space, mummified by vacuum. The investigation team collected samples and ran scans. What they found chilled them to their core. These people hadn't been killed by weapons. They'd been processed, systematically harvested for organic compounds, their bodies reduced to component chemicals. The report reached High Arbiter Velmoth within hours. He read it 3 times, certain there must be an error. The Council had maintained peace for 3 centuries. Wars were things of the primitive past. This couldn't be real, but it was real. And it was just the beginning. Over the next 4 months, 6 more systems fell to the attackers. Each time, the pattern was the same. The unknown force arrived without warning, overwhelmed any resistance in days, and stripped the planets bare before moving on. The Council's ships that responded found only ruins and the processed remains of entire civilizations. Finally, at the Kormath system, a Council fleet arrived while the attack was still in progress. The fleet's sensors captured images of the enemy for the first time. The recordings were distributed to all Council members. The Carthex Swarm, as intelligence analysts named them, didn't build ships in any conventional sense. Their vessels were living things, grown rather than constructed. Each bioship was a creature of chitin and organic technology, ranging from frigate-sized hunters to kilometer-long dreadnoughts. They moved in perfect coordination, thinking with one vast hive mind. The Council fleet at Kormath tried to engage. It was a massacre. The bioships absorbed energy weapons fire, their hulls regenerating from damage faster than the Council ships could inflict it. When the Carthex returned fire, their organic projectiles punched through shields designed to stop particle beams and plasma bolts. The projectiles burrowed into ships, spreading rapidly through the vessels like cancer, converting the ships themselves into more Carthex biomass. Of the 50 Council ships that engaged the swarm at Kormath, 3 escaped. The rest were consumed, their crews processed for organic materials. Their ships converted into more Carthex drones. Panic spread through Council space. Billions of citizens began fleeing from frontier worlds toward the core systems. The Council convened emergency sessions daily, trying to formulate a response to a threat they didn't understand and couldn't fight. Admiral Torvax of the Tauraxian Defense Force presented the military situation. It was bleak. High Arbiter, our forces are not equipped for this kind of warfare. The Harmony protocols restricted our weapons development to non-lethal systems for peacekeeping. Our ships are designed to intimidate pirates and resolve trade disputes. The Carthex, there's something else entirely. Then we must adapt, Velmoth insisted. Surely our technology is superior. We are a civilization of 17 species with thousands of years of advancement. Advancement in what? Torvax asked bluntly. Art? Philosophy? Diplomatic protocol? Yes, we excel at those. But warfare? We have no soldiers, only police. We have no warships, only patrol vessels with ceremonial guns. We've spent 3 centuries congratulating ourselves on being peaceful while our actual ability to defend ourselves atrophied into nothing. The council chamber erupted in arguments. Some delegates insisted that diplomacy could work. Perhaps the Carthex could be reasoned with. Others proposed retreating to the core systems and building defensive positions. A few suggested finding ancient weapons in their archives, artifacts from their species' violent pasts. Kilden, the minor delegate who had spoken to Jinho, quietly raised his hand. When recognized, he said simply, "There is another option. We could ask humanity for help." The chamber fell silent. Then Velmoth's feathers ruffled in what humans would recognize as indignation. Absolutely not. Humanity is an unstable, violent species that refused our guidance. Involving them would be admitting our enlightened approach has failed. Our approach has failed, Kilvin pointed out. 8 systems have fallen. Billions are dead. The Carthex advance at a rate that will bring them to our core worlds within 18 months. We need warriors, and humanity has warriors. They have a military culture we tried to suppress. Perhaps that's exactly what we need now. Never, another delegate declared. We will find another way. We must. The alternative is accepting that violence has value, that our 3 centuries of peace were built on a foundation of naivety. I refuse to believe that. So the Council refused to contact Earth. Instead, they tried to mount their own defense. Civilian ships were hastily converted into military vessels. Ancient weapons designs were pulled from archives and rushed into production. Police forces were given combat training and told they were now soldiers. It wasn't enough. The Battle of Telraxia Prime demonstrated the futility of the Council's efforts. They assembled the largest fleet in their history, nearly 3,000 ships from a dozen species. Every vessel carried the best weapons the Council could produce in their desperate months of preparation. Surely this force could stop the swarm. The battle lasted 14 hours. The Carthex bioships came in waves, absorbing damage that should have destroyed them, regenerating faster than they could be hurt. The Council's hastily trained crews panicked when the organic projectiles began burrowing through their hulls. Ships broke formation. Captains who'd never fought a real battle made fatal tactical errors. By the end, over 2,000 Council ships were destroyed or captured. Telraxia Prime, one of the founding worlds of the Council, fell to the swarm. 4 billion people died in the processing. The survivors of the battle limped back to Verathon Prime, carrying a simple truth. The Council could not win this war alone. Meanwhile, on Earth, Intelligence Officer Soman delivered her latest briefing to the Strategic Command. Long-range monitoring stations had been tracking the situation in Council space for months. The data painted a clear picture. The Carthex swarm is advancing at a steady pace through Council territory, she explained, highlighting systems on a holographic display. At current rates, they'll reach the edge of Council space in approximately 14 months. After that, they'll likely begin expanding in multiple directions, including toward human colonies. Admiral Hygiene studied the data. How long until they reach our space if the Council collapses completely? 16 months, possibly less if they split their forces. They seem to be locating inhabited systems through electromagnetic signals. All our colonies broadcast continuously. They'll be easy to find. Jinho, now serving as Chief of Strategic Affairs, asked the critical question. Can we stop them? Soman hesitated. Unknown. The Carthex bioships are unlike anything in our tactical databases. But they're not invulnerable. TH. Council's weapons just aren't designed for actual combat. Ours are. Additionally, the swarm seems to rely on overwhelming force and regeneration rather than tactical sophistication. A prepared defender with the right weapons might be effective. How prepared are we? Haijin asked. Fleet strength is up 40% since the Council rejection. All colonies have upgraded defenses. Marine Corps has expanded to 7 million with combat training for invasion scenarios. Research Division has developed several new weapon systems, specifically designed to counter biological threats. Soman pulled up additional data. We're not as ready as I'd like, but we're far more ready than the Council. Haijin sat back, considering. If the Council falls, we face the swarm alone with no intelligence on their full capabilities and no buffer zone. Every battle they win makes them stronger. They convert captured resources into more bioships. We'd be fighting an enemy at full strength after they've consumed half the galaxy. So what are you suggesting? Asked General Mino, head of the Marine Corps. I'm suggesting that letting the Council die might be satisfying emotionally, but it's terrible strategy. Jinho laughed bitterly. You want to help them? After everything they did to us? I want to survive, Hygiene replied. And survival means fighting the Carthex before they're unstoppable. It means hitting them while they're spread across multiple fronts. It means having the Council as a buffer zone and a source of intelligence, even if they're useless in actual combat. The debate raged through Earth's government for weeks. Public opinion was mixed. Many people wanted to let the arrogant Council suffer. Others recognized the practical necessity of intervention. Then came the intercepted transmission. It was never meant for human ears, just a desperate message from a Council evacuation ship. A Quillarian mother was recording a message for family in another system. In the background, you could hear children crying. The mother spoke about how the peacekeepers couldn't protect them, how the governments promised safety but couldn't deliver, how she wished someone, anyone, could stop the killing. The transmission was leaked to Earth's public networks. Billions of humans heard it. The children's cries resonated across a species that, despite everything, still responded to innocent suffering. Opinion shifted rapidly. The question became not whether to help, but how. Admiral Haijin was granted authority to make contact with the Council. She drafted a message herself, keeping it simple and direct. To the Galactic Council, Earth has monitored your conflict with the Carthex swarm. We recognize this threat will eventually reach human space. In the interest of mutual survival, we are prepared to offer military assistance. Our forces will operate under human command. We will not accept Council authority over our fleet or tactics. If these terms are acceptable, respond immediately. Time is running out for all of us. The message was sent to Verathon Prime through standard diplomatic channels. On Earth, people waited to see if the Council's pride would finally break dot at Verathon Prime. Velmoth received the message privately before presenting it to the full Council. He read it 3 times, each time feeling his certainty crumble a little more. Humanity was offering help. The species he had rejected, The dangerous primitives he had tried to suppress were willing to fight for a galaxy that had turned them away. Part of him wanted to refuse out of pure stubbornness. But he remembered Talraxia Prime. He remembered the 8 fallen systems. He remembered the projections showing the Carthax reaching the core worlds within a year. Velmoth called an emergency council session. When the delegates assembled, he displayed the human message without comment. The chamber exploded into argument. Some delegates called it a trap. Others insisted accepting help from humanity proved the council's moral failure. A few suggested that humans might be in league with the Carthax somehow. Kilvin spoke up again. We are dying. Our enlightened civilization is being consumed by an enemy we cannot fight. Humanity offers assistance. Whether we like them or not is irrelevant. Whether they're right about the value of military strength is irrelevant. What matters is that billions of our people are already dead, and billions more will follow unless we accept reality. The reality is that we need help, and they're offering it. The vote was called. It passed, barely. The council agreed to accept human assistance under human terms. The response was sent to Earth. It was formal, diplomatic, and notably lacking any apology or acknowledgement of past wrongs. But hidden in the bureaucratic language was a simple truth. The council was admitting it couldn't survive. Alone, humanity mobilized for war. The first human. Ships arrived at the Corvin Reach. Staging area exactly 72 hours after the council's acceptance. Admiral Haijin commanded from the battleship Indomitable, a vessel that made council ships look like pleasure yachts. Where council vessels featured smooth curves and artistic designs, human warships were angular, efficient, and covered in weapon systems. Commander Doyan led the fighter squadrons. Flying craft specifically designed for combat against biological targets. Each fighter carried missiles loaded with thermal warheads if the Carthax bioships regenerated. Burning them completely would solve that problem. Captain Jino had come as the official liaison between human forces and the council fleet. He stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching his council ships nervously maintain distance from the human battle group. The council commanders clearly didn't know what to make of their new allies. Admiral Haijin opened a communication channel to the council fleet commander, a Talrexian named Horvax. Admiral, my tactical officers need full intelligence on Carthax combat patterns. Every engagement, every scan, every observation. Send it all. Horvax hesitated. With respect, Admiral Haijin, some of that data is classified council intelligence. Haijin's response was flat. Then unclassify it. We can't fight an enemy we don't understand. You've been losing because you don't share information properly, and you don't coordinate effectively. That changes now. Send the data or we're leaving. The data came through within minutes. Intelligence Officer Soman and her team analyzed it rapidly, building tactical profiles of Carthax behavior. What they found was both encouraging and terrifying. They're predictable, Soman reported. The swarm uses overwhelming force in direct assaults. They don't do feints or complex maneuvers. But they adapt. Each engagement shows slight improvements in their tactics based on what worked against council forces. So they learn, Haijin noted. Fine, we'll teach them the wrong lessons. The human fleet spent 3 days drilling with council forces, teaching them new formations and tactics. The council captains were resistant at first. Their peaceful culture had ingrained certain assumptions about how battles should be fought. Jinho found himself spending hours explaining concepts that seemed obvious to humans. You cannot retreat just because your shields are down, he told a Quillarian captain. Your ship still has weapons. Your crew is still alive. You can still fight. Retreating immediately tells the enemy that shields are your only defense. They'll focus on shield disruption, and you'll lose every time. But without shields, my crew is in danger, the captain protested. Your crew is in danger regardless. This is war. People die, but they die for nothing if you retreat every time things get difficult. It was a harsh lesson for species that had forgotten what real warfare meant. Some council officers understood. Others never would. Then the Carthax came to Corvin Reach. The swarm arrived with over 1,000 bioships, clearly intending to crush the Council's last major stronghold before advancing on the core worlds. They came in their standard formation, a massive wave of smaller vessels backed by the huge Dreadnought class, ships that had destroyed every Council fleet they'd encountered. The Council forces wanted to meet them head-on, as they'd done before. Admiral Haijin had other plans. All human vessels execute dispersal pattern Taegyuk. Council forces maintain position as the anvil. We're going to be the hammer. The human fleet split into 6 battle groups, each taking position around the system at seemingly random points. The Council ships remained in traditional defensive formation around the inhabited planet. To the Carthax, it looked like the humans were scattering in fear while the Council prepared for another futile last stand. The swarm advanced on the Council positions. But as they entered the inner system, the human battle groups struck from 6 different vectors simultaneously. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on where their regeneration gave them an advantage, human ships hit and ran, targeting the same bioships with concentrated fire before breaking off. Commander, Dion's fighters proved especially effective. They'd been designed to fight in 3 dimensions in ways that larger ships couldn't manage. His squadrons dove through Carthax formations, each fighter launching thermal missiles at close range before breaking away. The missiles were programmed to penetrate the bioship hulls before detonating, burning them from the inside out. The Carthax attempted to adapt, sending swarms of smaller hunter ships after the fighters. But human pilots had been training for atmospheric combat and space warfare for their entire careers. They led the hunters into kill zones where heavier human ships waited with point defense systems. The battle raged for 18 hours. The Carthax kept trying to force a decisive engagement with the Council fleet, but every time they committed to an assault, human forces would hit them from an unexpected angle. The bioship's regeneration ability became a liability. It took time and energy. Time that human forces used to reposition and strike again. When the Carthax finally retreated, they left behind over 300 destroyed bioships. The human fleet lost 40 vessels. The Council fleet, protected by human tactics, lost only 15 ships instead of the hundreds they'd expected. It was the first major defeat the Carthax swarm had suffered in the entire war. In the aftermath, Council officers flooded human ships with messages. Some were congratulatory. Others were questions about how humans had fought so effectively. A few were simply stunned observations that warfare could be something other than mutual destruction. Jinho found himself in a meeting with High Arbiter Velmoth, who had traveled to Corvin Reach to witness the battle. The Quilarian looked diminished somehow, his feathers less bright than before. "Your forces fight well," Velmoth admitted. "Better than I expected. Better than seems ... civilized." "We fight to win," Jinho replied. "You fight to maintain order. Those are different goals with different methods. Your soldiers sacrifice themselves willingly. We saw 3 of your ships deliberately ram Carthax dreadnoughts when their weapons were depleted. That level of ... devotion ... we do not understand." Jinho looked at the data screens showing casualty reports. 40 ships meant roughly 6,000 human deaths. Each one was a person who'd volunteered to defend a galaxy that had rejected them. "We understand that some things are worth dying for. Protecting others is one of them, even when those others don't particularly like us." Velmoth was silent for a long moment. 2 years ago, I told you that humanity needed to put down your weapons and trust in peace. I believed the galaxy had evolved beyond war, that conflicts could be resolved through wisdom and dialogue. And now? Jinho asked. Now I know that evil exists, that some enemies cannot be reasoned with, that peace is not a natural state of the universe, but something that must be actively defended. Velmuth's 6 eyes focused on Jinho. I was wrong about your species. The Council was wrong. Yes, Jinho agreed simply. You were. Will you accept an apology? Jinho considered the question. An apology won't bring back the thousands of humans who just died defending your worlds. It won't erase 2 years of isolation and sanctions. But it's a start. What matters now is winning this war. We can deal with the politics later. Over the following months, human forces became the vanguard of every major operation against the Cartheks. The pattern from Corvin Reach repeated across a dozen systems. Human tactics aggressive, adaptable, willing to take casualties to achieve victory proved effective, where Council methods had failed, but the cost was brutal. Humanity lost tens of thousands of personnel. Some ships were completely destroyed, their crews killed to the last person. Earth's citizens watched casualty reports climb daily, wondering why their people were dying for. Aliens who'd rejected them, Commander Doyons. Fighter wing was reduced to half. Strength after a desperate battle at Zarian 4. When offered the chance to rotate back to Earth for rest and reinforcements, he refused. We stop here or we stop at Earth. I'd rather stop here. Admiral Haijin developed a reputation among both human and Council forces as a commander who would spend lives when necessary, but never waste them. She studied every battle, learned from every loss, and adapted tactics constantly. The Cartheks were learning too, but humans learned faster. Intelligence officer Somin made a critical discovery after analyzing captured Cartheks biomatter. The swarm operated through a complex communication network, linking all their ships to centralized command nodes. Destroy the nodes and entire sections of the swarm would become disorganized and vulnerable. Finding the command nodes was the problem. They were hidden among thousands of regular bioships, protected by the strongest Carthex vessels. But Somin proposed a solution. Use human ships as bait to force the swarm into situations where the command nodes would have to reveal themselves through their communication. Patterns. It was a risky strategy that would deliberately expose human vessels to overwhelming enemy forces. When Admiral Haijin presented the plan to her captains, she was honest about the odds. Some of you won't come back. Probably most of you won't come back. But if this works, we can cripple the swarm's ability to coordinate. We can turn this war from a slow defeat into something we can actually win. Every captain volunteered. The operation took place at the Draven system. Human ships deliberately moved into an ambush, broadcasting false signals that suggested they were alone and vulnerable. The Cartheks took the bait, committing massive forces. As the human ships fought desperately to survive, Somin tracked the communication patterns in the enemy formation. There, the command node was a massive bioship in the center of the Carthex formation, larger than any they'd seen before. It was directing the entire battle. All forces, target coordinates are marked, Somin transmitted. Concentrate all fire on that ship. Everything we have. The human ships that were still combat capable turned their weapons on the command node. Council reinforcements, following the plan, dropped out of hyperspace at that exact moment and added their firepower. For 3 minutes, thousands of weapons converged on a single target. The command node exploded in a spectacular burst of organic matter. Immediately, the Carthex formation dissolved into chaos. Individual bioships continued fighting, but their coordination vanished. They could be defeated piecemeal. The Battle of Draven cost humanity 80 ships and 12,000 personnel. But it proved the swarm could be beaten. More importantly, it gave the Council hope for the first time since the war began. On Earth, Intelligence Officer Soman was awarded humanity's highest military honor. She accepted it quietly, thinking of all the people who died to prove her theory correct. The war continued. Humans and Council forces pushed back against the Karthics, winning battles, reclaiming systems. But the swarm still had vast resources and countless bioships. The final confrontation was coming, and everyone knew it would be apocalyptic. Admiral Hygiene began planning for an assault on the Karthics, staging grounds in the Void Sector. It would be the largest military operation in galactic history, and it would require every ship, every soldier, every bit of courage that humanity and the Council could muster. Jinho looked at the battle plans and felt a cold certainty. Many of them would die in that final battle. Perhaps all of them. But they would die ending a threat that could have consumed the entire galaxy. He wondered if the Council finally understood what humans had known all along. Peace is precious precisely because it must be defended. And sometimes, defending peace requires warriors willing to fight. The Void Sector had earned its name honestly. It was a region of space with few stars, and even fewer habitable systems. A dark stretch between spiral arms where nothing lived. Exactly the kind of place where a species might hide while preparing for conquest. The Karthics had chosen well. Admiral Hygien's fleet gathered at the edge of the void. Over 5,000 ships represented the combined might of humanity and the 17 Council species. It was the largest military force ever assembled in known space. It would have to be enough. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Jinho watched the final preparations. He'd been offered a safe position, coordinating from the rear. He'd refused. If this was humanity's last battle, he wanted to see it firsthand. Commander Doyan's fighter squadrons were already launching, conducting final equipment checks. His wing had taken terrible casualties over the past year. Of the original 200 pilots who'd started the war, only 43 remained. They'd been reinforced with fresh pilots from Earth, but the newcomers lacked the veterans' experience. Doyan gathered his squadron leaders for a final briefing. The assault plan calls for us to provide screening against Karthix hunters while the capital ships engage their command structures. Standard tactics. But I want you all to understand something. He looked at each face, old and young, experienced and fresh. Today, we're not fighting for the Council. We're not even fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every living being in this galaxy. The Karthics don't stop. They don't negotiate. They consume everything. If we fail today, they keep going until there's nothing left but biomass. One of the younger pilots raised his hand. Sir, what are our chances? Doyan considered lying, then decided these people deserved truth. Honestly? Maybe 30% that we win. Maybe 50% we hurt them badly enough that they retreat. 20% we all die here, and the galaxy falls. But here's what matters. Those odds are better than anything else we've got. So let's make them count. The fleet began its approach into the void. Long-range sensors detected the Karthix staging ground, a massive cluster of bioships, numbering in the tens of thousands, arranged around 3 enormous structures that appeared to be command hive ships. Intelligence suggested those hives controlled everything. Destroy them, and the swarm would collapse. Getting to them was the problem. The battle began before the Human Council. Fleet even reached firing range. The Karthics sent forward waves of hunter ships, thousands of small but deadly biocraft designed to overwhelm point defenses. Doyan's fighters met them first, and space erupted into chaos. Fighter combat had no room for hesitation. Doyan twisted through a cloud of Karthix hunters, his targeting computer acquiring and destroying 3 before they could react. Around him, his squadron fought with desperate skill. They'd learned over a year of warfare that the hunters were fast but fragile. One good hit would destroy them. The problem was getting that hit before they got you. A young pilot named Bora screamed over the comm as hunters swarmed her position. Doyan redirected, launching everything he had at the cluster. The hunters disintegrated, but not before one managed to attach to Bora's fighter. She ejected just before the bioship began converting her craft into more Carthex biomass. The main fleet engaged moments later. Human and council ships opened fire with every weapon they had, trying to blast through the Carthex defensive positions. The bioships returned fire with organic projectiles that punched through shields and armor, burrowing into ship hulls like parasites. Admiral Haijin watched the tactical display with cold focus. The plan called for a concentrated push toward the central hive ship, but the Carthex were defending it with everything they had. She made a calculation, one she'd hoped to avoid. All human vessels execute suicide run formation Delta. Jinho understood what she meant. Admiral, that will expose our ships to— I know exactly what it does, Captain. Haijin's voice was hard. But we need to draw their forces away from the hives. The only way to do that is to give them a target they can't ignore. We're going in. The human capital ships, including the Indomitable, broke from the main formation and drove directly into the heart of the Carthex defensive line. It was tactically insane, a deliberate sacrifice to create an opening for the Council forces to reach the hive-ships that the Carthex took the bait. Thousands of bioships converged on the human vessels, overwhelming them with sheer numbers. Ships began dying immediately. The destroyer Dauntless was torn apart by focused fire. The battleship Guardian's engines exploded, sending it spinning into a Carthex cluster where both were destroyed, but the sacrifice worked. With the Carthex focused on the human suicide run, a path opened to the hive ships. Council forces, led by Admiral Harvax, pushed through with everything they had. On the Indomitable, alarms screamed as Carthex projectiles burrowed through the hull. Sections began venting atmosphere. The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, routing power, maintaining shields, keeping weapons firing. Intelligence Officer Soman, stationed in the Combat Information Center 3 decks below, tracked the progress of the Council assault. They were getting close to the first hive ship. Close enough. Admiral, Council forces are in position. You can pull back. Negative, Haijin replied calmly, even as another impact rocked the ship. If we retreat now, the Carthex will redirect to stop the Council attack. We hold here. Jinho gripped a console as the ship shuddered under sustained fire. Through the viewports, he could see human ships dying all around them. The cruiser Resolute exploded in a brilliant flash. The destroyer Swift vanished under a swarm of hunters. This was what war truly meant, not glory, not honor, just death and sacrifice in pursuit of a necessary goal. Then the first hive ship exploded. The Council forces had gotten through. The destruction was spectacular, a chain reaction that consumed a quarter of the Carthex formation. Immediately, that entire section of the swarm lost coordination, bioships drifting aimlessly. Target the second hive, Haijin ordered. All remaining human vessels, one more push. But there weren't many human vessels left. Of the original 1,000 ships in the human fleet, maybe 300 were still combat capable. The Indomitable itself was failing. Half its weapons offline, shields gone, hull breaches on 12 decks. Commander Doyen's fighters had been reduced to 19 operational craft. He led them in a desperate run toward the second hive ship, dodging through Carthex fire. They carried the last of their heavy ordnance, missiles specifically designed to penetrate deep into biological structures. All fighters, target the central mass, Doyan transmitted. Concentrate fire. One shot, make it count. They dove toward the hive, every weapon firing. Doyan could see the organic texture of the massive biostructure, could see the smaller ships launching from its surface to intercept. He armed his last missiles and fired. Watching them streak toward the target, one of his pilots, a veteran named Yuna, deliberately flew her damaged fighter directly into the hive's surface, just as the missiles impacted. The combined explosion triggered a cascade failure. The second hive ship began to collapse in on itself, 2 hives down, 1 remaining, but the cost was devastating. The human suicide formation had been virtually annihilated. Of the 1,000 ships that began the battle, less than 100 were still fighting. The Indomitable was dying, fires spreading through its corridors, life support failing. Admiral Hygiene knew her ship had minutes at most. She opened a channel to Admiral Horvax. "Telraxian fleet, the path is clear. Finish this. Admiral Hygiene, we're detecting multiple breaches in your ship. You need to evacuate. No time for that. Take out the last hive. That's an order. You don't command Council forces," Horvax pointed out, but his voice was thick with emotion. "But I'll honor your request. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." The Council fleet, having learned from months of fighting alongside humans, pressed forward with an aggression that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. They'd learned from their allies that sometimes you had to risk everything to win everything. On the Indomitable, the crew prepared for the end. Soman had made it to the bridge, refusing to die alone in the information center. Jinho stood beside Admiral Haijin, both of them watching the Council assault on the final hive. "Do you think they'll win?" Jinho asked quietly. "They'll win," Haijin replied with certainty. "We've shown them how. They just needed someone to prove it was possible." Jinho thought about his journey. From idealistic diplomat to disillusioned strategist to witness of humanity's finest hour. We could have let them burn. The Council rejected us. We owed them nothing. We didn't do it for them, Hygiene said. We did it because that's who we are. Humans protect others, even those who don't deserve it, especially those who don't deserve it. That's what makes us better than the Council ever was. The last hive ship exploded in a cascade of organic matter. The remaining Carthex bioships, suddenly without coordination or direction, began to retreat into the deeper void. The Council fleet pursued, but cautiously. They'd learned hard lessons about overextending. The battle was over. The war was won. But the victory was written in human blood. Of the 5,000 ships that entered the void, over 3,000 were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. 90% of those were human vessels. 2 million people died in that final battle, and 80% were human. Rescue ships began searching for survivors. The Indomitable was found drifting, its power completely gone. Recovery teams made their way through darkened corridors to the bridge, where they found Admiral Haijin, Intelligence Officer Soman, and Captain Jinho still alive, barely, kept breathing by emergency life support. Commander Doyan survived, one of only 6 pilots from his original squadron to make it through the entire war. When he was pulled from his damaged fighter, he simply sat in the rescue ship and stared at nothing, too exhausted even to sleep. 3 months after the battle, a ceremony was held on Verithon Prime. The council chambers had been repaired and expanded to accommodate the crowds. Representatives from every species gathered, along with thousands of human military personnel. High Arbiter Velmoth, who had aged visibly during the war, stood before the assembly. His 6 eyes were clouded with grief. Today we honor those who saved civilization. Not our civilization. Civilization itself. The Carthex swarm would have consumed every living being in this galaxy. They were stopped by courage, sacrifice, and warriors who understood what we had forgotten, that peace is not the absence of war, but the victory of those willing to fight for it. He turned to where Captain Jinho stood, still recovering from injuries sustained when the Indomitable nearly died. Beside him were Admiral Hai-Jin in a wheelchair, and Commander Do-Yun, whose hands still shook from battle stress. 2 years ago, humanity came to us in peace. We rejected you. We called you violent, dangerous, uncivilized. We demanded you disarm, submit, become something you were not. We were fools. Velmuth's voice broke slightly. We thought peace made us enlightened. We thought our lack of weapons proved our moral superiority. But when true evil came, we had nothing with which to defend ourselves. Nothing except the warriors we had scorned. The chamber was absolutely silent. Humanity lost 2 million personnel defending species that had rejected them. 2 million people who could have stayed home, stayed safe, let us face the consequences of our arrogance. But they came anyway. Not because we served it, not because they owed us anything, but because they understood something we did not, that civilization is not measured by how peaceful you are in times of peace, but by who you protect when darkness comes. Velmuth approached Jinho directly. Captain, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I offer our deepest apology. We were wrong about humanity. We were wrong about the nature of peace. We were wrong about everything that mattered. Can you forgive us? Jinho was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his dead comrades, about the ships that would never come home, about the families torn apart by a war they never asked for. I can't speak for the dead, he said finally. They paid the price for your mistakes. But I can say this: humanity didn't fight for your approval. We fought because it was necessary. If that's enough to build a real partnership where we're equals and not subjects, then maybe their sacrifice meant something. It will be, Velmuth promised. The Council is being reformed. The Harmony Protocols are being rewritten. Every species will maintain genuine defensive forces. No more ceremonial weapons. No more pretending that peace maintains itself. We will remember what this war taught us. The Council formally offered humanity full membership with no conditions. Earth accepted Dot in the months that followed. Memorials were erected across Council worlds. Each bore the names of human personnel who died defending planets they'd never seen, protecting people they'd never met. The largest memorial was on Talraxia Prime, rebuilt from the ruins the Carthex left behind. The inscription, written in 17 languages, reads simply, "They came when we needed them most. May we never again mistake their kindness for weakness, or their peace for surrender." Scholar Kilvin, who had warned the Council about underestimating humanity, visited Jinho one final time before Earth's delegation returned home. I tried to tell them, he said quietly. I said rejecting your peaceful approach would create something far more dangerous. Were we dangerous? Jinho asked. No, you were necessary. There's a difference. The galaxy needed warriors, and the Council's arrogance ensured that when we finally asked for help, we had to beg it from people we'd wronged. That's the lesson: refuse peace when it's offered, and you might not like what comes instead. Jinho looked out at the stars. We didn't want to be warriors. We wanted to be explorers, diplomats, partners. But when you need warriors, we'll be there. That's both humanity's curse and our gift. On Earth, the returning forces were welcomed as heroes. But the celebrations were muted by grief. Every community had lost someone. Every family knew the cost. Admiral Hai-Jin, retiring from active service, gave one final interview. The reporter asked if she thought the sacrifice was worth it. My job isn't to decide if it was worth it, Hai-Jin replied. My job was to ensure their sacrifice achieved the objective. We saved the galaxy. We proved humanity's worth. We earned our place among the stars. If that's not worth fighting for, I don't know what is. Commander Doyan never spoke publicly about the war. He retired to a quiet colony world and spent his days teaching young pilots, making sure the next generation would be ready if darkness came again. Intelligence Officer Soman continued her work, now as Chief of Galactic Intelligence. She monitored threats, tracked potential dangers, and made sure humanity would never be caught unprepared again. Captain Gino eventually returned to diplomacy, but a different kind. He represented Earth in the Reformed Council, ensuring that humanity's voice was heard and respected. He never forgot what it cost to earn that respect. The galaxy entered a new era. The Council was no longer a gathering of the enlightened ruling over lesser species, but a true partnership where strength and wisdom were equally valued. The Harmony Protocols were rewritten to acknowledge that peace required both diplomatic skill and the ability to defend it. Humanity took its place among the stars as equals, not as supplicants seeking approval, not as conquerors taken by force, but as partners who had proved their worth through sacrifice. But in quiet moments, in ceremonies and memorials, the question lingered. What if the Council had accepted humanity's peaceful overture 2 years earlier? What if they'd recognized potential allies instead of threats? How many lives would have been saved? The answer was uncomfortable, but necessary. The Council's arrogance had cost 2 million human lives. It had nearly cost civilization itself. The tuition for that lesson was paid in blood, and the galaxy would spend generations trying to honor that debt. Humanity had tried to offer peace. The Council turned them away. When darkness came, humans returned anyway, not for revenge, but for survival. They proved that seeking peace doesn't mean being weak, and that those who extend their hand in friendship might also be the ones who save you when everything falls apart. The story ended not with triumphant celebration, but with solemn understanding. The galaxy had learned its lesson, but the cost of teaching it would echo through history forever. A reminder that prejudice and arrogance carry prices too high to pay. In the end, humanity hadn't just saved the galaxy. They'd shown what it meant to be truly civilized, not by avoiding conflict, but by protecting others, even when you had every reason not to. That was humanity's gift to the stars, earned through sacrifice and sealed in memory.